Hi class, in lesson 3.5 we will be talking about equivalent fractions. Learning targets for today: we will determine equal portions of a whole, determine equivalent fractions, calculate equivalent fractions using a form of one whole, simplify fractions, and order fractions. Key terms to look for today: simplest form and the multiplicative identity property. We are going to start lesson 3.5 with problem 2 on page 155. Throughout this chapter you have encountered equivalent fractions. Recall that equivalent fractions are fractions that represent the same part-to-whole relationship. When determining equivalent fractions, you must multiply the numerator and the denominator of a fraction by the same number. This process is the same as multiplying the given fraction by a fraction with the same numerator and denominator, such as 3/3. And we'll take a look at that example here in a second. Recall that any fraction whose numerator and denominator are the same number is equivalent to 1. Multiplying any number by 1 does not change that number. So in order to change a fraction to an equivalent fraction with a larger numerator and denominator, you need to multiply the fraction by a form of 1. The example that we have here is 5/8 times the 3/3 is going to give me an equivalent fraction of 15/24. To get started today, number 1 tells us to complete each number sentence with the correct fraction to make it true. Explain your reasoning. You can also use your fraction strips if needed to help you determine the missing fraction to make an equivalent fraction. So go ahead and do letters A through D with your group members. For letter A, we are going to multiply by 3/3 to get 15/18. For letter B, we're going to multiply by 5/5 in order to get 15/20. For letter C, we're going to multiply by 3/3 to get 15/24. And for letter D, we're going to multiply by 1/1 to get 9/27. Let's turn to the top of page 156. Number 2 says that you just multiplied each fraction by the same number. What number was it? It was a fraction form of 1 in order to get your equivalent fraction. We multiplied by 3/3 2 times, we multiplied by 5/5, and we multiplied by 1/1. The multiplicative identity property states that A times 1 is equal to A, where A is a non-zero number. Number 3 tells us to complete each equation to make the fractions equivalent. Explain your reasoning, and again, you can use your fraction strips if you need help determining the equivalent fractions. Please do letters A through E with your group members. For letter A, to calculate the equivalent fraction, you're going to multiply the numerator and denominator by 4/4, which is a form of 1, to get 4/16 for your answer. Letter B, you're going to multiply by 2/2 to get 4/6 for your equivalent fraction. For letter C, you are also going to multiply by 2/2 to get 14/32. For letter D, you're going to multiply by 3/3 to get 9/12. And for letter E, you're going to multiply by 1/1 in order to get 1/18. We're going to skip number 4 and move over to page 157. To change a fraction to an equivalent fraction with a smaller numerator and denominator, you must divide the numerator and denominator by a form of 1. So for example, if we have 15/24 and we divide by 3/3, again a form of 1, we get 5/8 as our equivalent fraction. Whenever you determine an equivalent fraction whose numerator and denominator are smaller than the original fraction's numerator and denominator, the new fraction is simpler. When a fraction cannot be simplified further, the fraction is in simplest form or completely simplified. Simplest form is a way of writing a fraction so that the numerator and denominator have no common factors other than 1. We have a couple of ways that you can say a fraction is in simpler form. Take a look at those examples. You can also see that it is sometimes read in lowest terms as well. I know sometimes people use lowest terms when we also talk about simplest form. Number 5 tells us to determine if each fraction is simplified completely. If the fraction is not simplified completely, write the fraction in simplest form. Do letters A through C with your group members. If we look at letter A, this fraction is simplified because 3 and 8 have no common factors other than 1. For letter B, 2/4 is not simplified. 2 and 4 still share a common factor of 2, so the fraction in simplest form would be 1/2. And finally, for letter C, this is also not simplified. 6 and 9 share a common factor of 3, so the fraction in simplest form would be 2/3. At the top of page 158, number 6 tells us to circle the fractions that are simplified completely, and how do you know? 9/13 and 7/12 are going to be the only fractions that are simplified completely. We know this because the only factor that the numerator and denominator are going to have in common is 1. Recall that the factors of a number are those numbers that divide into the number with no remainder. For number 7, how can you use factors of a number in order to simplify fractions? So discuss and answer number 7 with your group members. For number 7, if we find the greatest common factor, or the GCF, and take that number and divide the numerator and the denominator by that number, we will get the fraction in simplest form. So keep that in mind as we move forward. Find the GCF of the numerator and the denominator. When you find the GCF and divide, you'll be able to figure out what the fraction is in simplest form. Number 8 tells us to write each fraction in simplest form, so go ahead and do letters A through F with your group members. What I would also do is write down what the GCF is so that you know that you have the fraction simplified. If we take a look at letter A, the fraction in simplest form is going to be 2/3. Our GCF is 3. Letter B, 3/4. Our GCF is also 3. Letter C, 1/3. GCF is 8. Letter D, 4/5. GCF is 3. Letter E, 1/2. Our GCF is 18. And for letter F, 1/3. Our GCF is 14. Again, we are dividing both the numerator and the denominator by the same factor, which would be the same as dividing by a form of 1. Number 9 at the top of page 159, Miss Glick asked her students to simplify 2436. Jose, Sarah, and Clifton's methods are shown. Analyze each method and solution to determine if it is correct. If one of the methods is incorrect, what would you tell the student to do to correct his or her method? So take a look at Jose, Sarah, and Clifton and answer with your group members. If we look first at Jose, he is partly correct, but it is not complete. We are not in simplest form as of yet. 6/9 still has a common factor of 3, so what we can tell Jose to do is to continue to look for factors that are common to both the numerator and the denominator, in this case 6/9, and divide until you can get the fraction in simplest form. Sarah's method, she is correct in her thinking. She divided both the numerator and the denominator by the GCF in order to get 2/3 for her simplest form fraction. Clifton used prime factorization to determine the fraction in simplest form. His method is also correct. He just divided out the common factors from the numerator and the denominator in order to come up with 2/3 for his simplified fraction. Let's turn to page 160 and practice a little bit with his method. Let's simplify each fraction using prime factorization, so go ahead and do letters A through F with your group members. For letters A through F, I did go ahead and crossed off the factors that divided out, so it's very similar to the example that you saw on the previous page. For letter A, we should have 3/4, letter B, 1/3, letter C, 6/7, D, 5/6, E, 4/5, and for letter F, if we even show the prime factorization, we can see that this fraction is already simplified. We don't have any factors that we are going to have to cross out. For number 11, something similar to what we did on the previous page, we are going to simplify each fraction now just using the GCF, and we also want to state the GCF that we used. So finish up with letters A through F. Letter A, our GCF is 4, so our fraction is 6/7. Letter B, GCF is 1, so our fraction is 45/56. Letter C, our GCF is 11, so our simplest form fraction is 3/7. Letter D, GCF is 16, 1/2 is our answer. Letter E, GCF is 9 for 7/8. And letter F, our GCF is also 9 for a simplest form fraction of 8/11. That is going to do it for today for lesson 3.5 on equivalent fractions. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.